I never expected her to open the door that day, let alone ask me to step inside. I knew enough about her to understand why she wouldn't usually. She carried herself in a way that told people where the line was, and she rarely let anyone cross it. That's probably why I couldn't stop thinking about it afterward, because she let me cross, even for a second. It was a Tuesday, gray and quiet. I'd been working the late shift at the bookstore across town, and when I closed up, I noticed the little repair shop still had its light on. Her car was parked out front, the old sedan she always drove in with. I almost kept walking. I almost convinced myself it wasn't my place. But then I remembered the look she'd given me last week, half smile, half warning, when she caught me shelving her favorite author in the wrong section. That was enough to pull me in. When I pushed the door open, I caught her standing behind the counter, hair tied up loosely, glasses slipping down her nose as she bent over some papers. She didn't look startled, not exactly. More like she was deciding, in that split second, whether I was trouble or not. "You're here late," I said, voice sounding younger than I wanted. "And you're nosy," she replied without looking up. Her voice was smooth, practiced, like she'd said that kind of thing before. I laughed, too quickly, and hovered in the doorway, pretending I wasn't waiting for permission. The place smelled faintly of oil and coffee, both stale but oddly comforting. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes held me a second too long, the way people do when they already know more than they're letting on. That's when I realized she knew. She knew about the nights I stayed late at the shop just to time my walk home with hers. She knew I found excuses to ask about her car when I didn't really care about spark plugs or tire pressure. But instead of shutting me out, she said quietly, "Come in before you let the cold in." I did. The shop was dim, the only lighted desk lamp throwing a soft circle across her desk. I stood there, awkward, while she went back to writing, the scratch of her pen filling the silence. I should have said something, anything, but I couldn't. "Coffee's there," she said eventually, nodding toward the counter without glancing up. I poured myself a cup, even though it had clearly been sitting for hours. It was bitter, but it gave my hand something to do. I sat across from her, trying not to notice the way she adjusted her glasses with the back of her hand, or how she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear without thinking. "Long night?" I asked. She sighed, then smiled faintly. "Aren't they all?" It wasn't much. Just a few words, half a smile. But it landed heavier than I expected. I felt like I'd been let in on something private, even though she hadn't told me anything at all. The clock ticked in the corner. Neither of us spoke. The kind of silence that should have been awkward, but somehow wasn't. She just kept writing, and I just kept sitting there, pretending I wasn't memorizing every detail. The curve of her wrist as she wrote, the way her jaw tightened when she paused. When I finally left, the night felt colder than before. But the warmth of her voice, just that one line, stayed with me. "Aren't they all?" I kept hearing it over and over, like she'd said something more than what the words carried. And maybe she had. She was struggling with a stack of boxes outside the shop, her hands hidden under work gloves, hair falling loose from its tie. I'd been on my way past, pretending to read the messages on my phone, when I caught the sharp sound of cardboard scraping against the pavement. "You're going to drop those," I said before I thought better of it. Her head turned sharply, eyes narrowing like I'd just trespassed on private ground. For a moment, I thought she'd tell me to keep walking. Instead, she exhaled through her nose, tired, and nodded at the box nearest to me. "If you're going to comment, you might as well make yourself useful." I took it from her, the weight heavier than I expected. She didn't thank me, just pushed the shop door open with her shoulder. The silence stretched thin between us as we carried the boxes inside. The place smelled different this time, like rain-soaked pavement mixed with the faint sweetness of something baked. Maybe she brought a pastry earlier. Maybe it was my imagination. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," I said quietly, setting my box down on the counter. She gave a dry laugh, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And who else is going to help?" "You." The way she said it wasn't cruel, but it stung all the same. I busied myself with cutting open the box, pretending I didn't hear the exhaustion under her words. Her hands brushed against mine as she reached for the same flap, a quick touch, gone in an instant, but enough to stop me in place. Her gloves were off now, tossed aside. I noticed the small things, the faint scar across her knuckle, the way her fingers curled protectively when she wasn't using them, as if holding something invisible. "You're quiet," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. "You like it better that way," I replied before I could stop myself. That earned me another look. This one softer, searching, but it disappeared just as quickly. She turned back to the boxes, tearing into the cardboard with more force than needed. For the first time, she seemed smaller. Not weaker exactly, but human in a way she didn't usually allow herself to be. She rubbed her temple absent-mindedly, muttering something under her breath about deadlines. The kind of tired mutter people let slip when they forget someone's listening. "You should take a break," I said. Her laugh was faint this time, almost broken. If I stopped every time I needed a break, I'd never get anything done. She didn't realize it, but I was memorizing everything. The curve of her tired smile, the way her voice lowered when she wasn't trying to be strong. We finished unpacking in silence. When I handed her the last box, our fingers touched again, just slightly, but neither of us pulled away as quickly as before. For a heartbeat, the shop was too quiet. That charged stillness, the kind you can't name, hung in the air. And when she finally let go, it felt like something in me didn't. The rain started quick and heavy, hammering against the shop windows like it was trying to get in. I'd stopped by on the excuse of returning a book she'd lent me, though really, I just wanted to see her again, and by the time the sky broke open, neither of us had a choice. "You should wait it out," she said, her voice careful, as if she was already regretting the invitation. So I stayed. She made tea in a chipped mug, pushing it toward me across the counter. The overhead light flickered every now and then, throwing her face into shadow before bringing it back. It made her look different each time I blinked, softer, then sharper, then unreadable. We talked about nothing, or maybe about everything, if you listened closely enough. I asked about her favorite book. She asked why I never went home right after work. Neither of us answered properly. At one point, she sat down beside me, closer than usual. Our shoulders didn't touch, but the distance was thin, almost artificial. I could feel her warmth in the space between us. "People will talk," she said suddenly, voice low. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. She glanced at me, eyes narrowing, then looked away. "Doesn't matter." The silence pressed in. The rain was loud, but not enough to cover the sound of my heart kicking against my ribs. I wanted to say something, anything, that would cut through the space she'd just created. Instead, I only managed, "You don't let people see you like this, do you?" Her breath caught. For a second, I thought she'd deny it. Instead, she whispered, "No, that was the moment." The fragile opening I'd been waiting for. Her shoulders slumped, her hands curled loosely around her mug, and the woman who usually carried herself like stone suddenly looked like she was made of glass. I almost told her everything, that I thought about her more than I should, that I stayed late just to see her headlights sweep across the street. But before I could, her phone rang. The sound was harsh, slicing the moment apart. She stared at the screen too long before answering, her voice clipped. "Yes, I know. No, it's fine." Her words were short, but her body told the truth. The way she pinched the bridge of her nose, the small tremor in her voice when she said, "Don't call this late again." Whoever it was, the call had drained the softness from her face, replaced it with the guardedness I was used to. She ended the call and set the phone down hard on the counter. For a second, we just sat there, the storm filling the silence between us. Her eyes met mine, tired but unflinching. I almost reached for her hand. I didn't, but I know she felt the same pull, because she didn't move away. The storm had passed by the time I came back to the shop. The pavement outside was still wet, reflecting streetlights like broken glass. I wasn't even sure why I went, habit or something deeper. Maybe I wanted to see if she'd pretend nothing had happened. She didn't. She was alone inside, closing up, moving slower than usual. When she noticed me, she didn't smile, didn't frown, just watched as I lingered in the doorway, waiting for her to decide if I was allowed in. "You don't learn, do you?" she murmured. "Maybe not." She sighed, but didn't send me away. Instead, she turned off the lamp and sat down, motioning half-heartedly toward the chair across from her. I sat. The air felt thick, heavier than it should have. We didn't speak at first. The silence stretched, long and taut, like the pause before something breaks. Finally, she said it. "What are we doing?" Her voice was soft, but it landed like a stone. I looked at her, really looked, at the tired lines around her eyes, the way her hand tightened on the edge of the table. She wasn't asking me for an answer. She was asking herself. I wanted to lie, to laugh it off, make it small. But I couldn't. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded, as if that was the only answer she expected. Her gaze held mine, unblinking, and for a moment it felt like we were both stripped bare of all the excuses we'd been using. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Then why let me in?" The silence after that was louder than any argument could have been. She shifted slightly, crossing her arms, uncrossing them, as if her body couldn't decide what it wanted. I leaned forward, not close enough to touch her, but close enough to feel the weight of the space between us. "Do you really want me to go?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She pressed them shut again, shaking her head almost imperceptibly. That silence told me more than words ever could. Her eyes softened for the briefest second, and then hardened again, like she was pulling shutters closed. She looked down at her hands. "You're too young to understand what this is." I swallowed, heart hammering. "Maybe, but I know it doesn't feel nothing." She flinched. Just slightly, but enough. The clock ticked. Neither of us moved. The truth sat between us, raw and undeniable, but still untouchable. When she finally stood, it was slow, deliberate, as if lifting herself out of that silence cost her. She turned away, her voice steady but low. "This can't go anywhere," she said. "And the cruel part is, I don't want it to stop." She'd left the shop phone off the hook, the line buzzing faintly under a drawer of receipts. I only noticed because she'd stepped outside for air, the night pressing cool through the open door. The voicemail had already started playing. Her voice first, recorded, lighter than the one I knew now. "Hey, it's me. Just checking in. Don't stay up too late." A beat of static, then a man's voice answered. Low, warm. "Always worrying. I'll be fine. Love you." The message ended abruptly, replaced by silence. But it wasn't empty silence. It was the kind that lingers in your chest, heavy, restless. I hung up the receiver carefully, as if being too loud might shatter something fragile. By the time she came back in, she looked steadier, though her eyes were red. "You were crying," I said before I could stop myself. She gave a short laugh, shaking her head. "Don't flatter yourself. The wind does this to me." But she didn't meet my eyes. I should have left it there, but I couldn't. The voicemail. Her body went still, shoulders tightening. She didn't turn, didn't speak for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "You weren't meant to hear that." "I know." She leaned against the counter, arms folded, her gaze fixed on some invisible point across the room. "It was years ago. My husband. Car accident." The words came out flat, like she'd rehearsed them so often they'd lost their shape. I felt my throat close, useless words caught inside. All I could say was, "I'm sorry." She finally looked at me, and in her eyes, beneath the practiced calm, beneath the guarded composure, there was something raw, something that shook me more than her words. "You remind me of him sometimes," she whispered. "The way you linger. The way you don't say what you want, but it's written all over you." The room felt too small suddenly, like her words had taken up all the air. "I'm not him," I managed, voice rough. "I know." Her lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. "That's the problem." The silence after that wasn't like before. It wasn't awkward or heavy. It was devastating in a different way, the kind of silence that says you can never unknow what was just spoken. I wanted to reach for her, to give her something, anything, that might ease the weight she carried. But I didn't move, because I knew it wasn't about me, not really. When she turned away, her hand brushed the counter, fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. She steadied herself before speaking, her voice low, almost breaking. "Don't make me want this twice." The night she stopped pretending, there was no storm, no excuse. Just us, in the shop after closing, both too stubborn to leave first. She was tidying papers that didn't need tidying, while I sat uselessly on the counter, watching her try to busy herself out of what we both already knew. Finally, she dropped the act. "You keep coming back," she said, not looking at me. "You keep letting me in," I answered. Her hands stilled, fingers resting on the stack of papers. She let out a long breath, the kind you release when you've run out of defenses. Then she turned and leaned against the counter, facing me fully for the first time in what felt like forever. "I told myself I wouldn't do this again," she murmured. I didn't ask do what. The way her voice broke on the last word told me everything. I slid off the counter, standing just a few feet from her. Close, but not enough to scare her away. "Then don't think of it as doing it again," I said quietly. "Think of it as this. Right now." She closed her eyes, shaking her head with the faintest smile. "You make it sound easy. It isn't." That earned me her gaze again, steady, vulnerable. And for once, there was no wall between us. No practiced composure, no guarded silence. Just two people who had run out of ways to deny the pull that had been there from the start. I didn't touch her at first. I just stood there, waiting. It was her hand that moved first. A small, almost imperceptible shift until her fingers grazed mine on the counter. She didn't grip, didn't hold. Just touched, like testing whether the world would end if she did. It didn't. So I let my hand turn, slow and careful, until our palms met. No rush, no drama, just the quiet weight of contact that felt more honest than any words could have. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't break the fragile truth hanging between us. We stayed like that, side by side, sharing the silence we'd both learned to fear and need. Her head tilted slightly, just enough that her forehead brushed my shoulder, light as a sigh. My chest ached with the simplicity of it. How something so small could feel like everything. I wanted to tell her I'd never leave. I wanted to promise things I couldn't know. But promises didn't belong here. Not for us. Instead, I just stood still, letting her lean, letting the moment be what it was. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Stay? Just stay." And I knew I would. Looking back, I still don't know the exact moment it shifted. Maybe it was that first night when she let me stay out of the rain. Maybe it was the silence that lingered between us long enough to feel like a language of its own. Or maybe it was simpler, that we were both tired of pretending we didn't notice what was already there. What I do know is this: nothing about it was dramatic. There was no declaration, no cinematic kiss under streetlights. It was smaller, quieter. The kind of love that grows in half-finished sentences and the brush of a hand that lingers a beat too long. Being with her didn't make me feel older or younger. It just made me feel real. Like for the first time, I wasn't performing who I thought I was supposed to be. She never asked me to impress her, never demanded anything more than honesty, even when honesty was the hardest thing to give. And her? She softened. Not all at once, not permanently, but little by little, she allowed herself to stop carrying everything alone. I saw it in the way she laughed one night, unrestrained, surprising even herself. I saw it in how she no longer apologized for being tired or for needing quiet. She let herself need, and she let me be there. I used to think love was about grand gestures, chasing someone down at the airport or shouting confessions in the rain. But what I learned with her is that love, at least the kind that lasts, often comes dressed in stillness, in unspoken understanding, in the way you can sit in the same room and feel like that's enough. I won't pretend it was easy. There were nights when she pulled away, reminded me of all the reasons it couldn't work. There were mornings when I wondered if I was foolish for staying. But somehow, even in the distance, even in the hesitation, the connection held. Because love, when it's real, doesn't vanish just because it scares you. It's been months now since that night she asked me to stay, and I still do. Some evenings, I find her asleep at the counter, papers scattered around her, glasses slipping down her nose. I cover her with a blanket and sit nearby, listening to the hum of the world outside. And in those quiet moments, I understand something I never did before. Love isn't always about fixing someone. Sometimes, it's simply about not leaving. Maybe that's the secret she taught me, the kind of lesson you don't get from books or advice columns. That love isn't loud. It's patient. It waits in the pauses. It grows in the spaces in between. And maybe, If you've ever felt it, really felt it, you know exactly what I mean. So let me ask you, have you ever had a connection that didn't make sense on paper, but made perfect sense in your heart?